The scout ship Verithsai drifted at the edge of a quiet star system. Its crew were bored. They had been checking empty systems for 3 weeks, and this one looked just as empty as the rest. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Hundreds of species bowed to its laws. Its fleets were endless. Its weapons could burn a planet to ash in minutes. No one dared to challenge it. Not anymore. Commander Sela Threx sat in her chair, watching the sensor screen. She was young for her rank, but sharp. Her crew respected her, because she never panicked, not even when pirates once boarded her last ship. She liked calm, she liked routine. "Report," she said, not even looking up. "Same as before, Commander," said her sensor officer, a lizard-skinned Draxian named Pol. "1 yellow star, 8 planets. Third one has an atmosphere that could support life. No signals detected, no structures, nothing." "Log it as empty and move on," Sela said. "We've wasted enough time here." But before Pol could type the command, his console beeped. A strange, sharp beep, not the normal warning tone. "Wait," Pol said. "I'm picking something up." Sela sat up straighter. "What kind of something?" "A signal. Radio waves. Very old, very weak, but it's structured. It's not random noise." The bridge went quiet. Everyone turned to look at the screen. "Play it," Sela ordered. A crackling sound filled the bridge, and then, faintly, a voice. It spoke in a language none of them understood, but the tone was clear. It sounded like a person talking. Then music. Simple, strange music, made with instruments none of them had ever heard. "That's from the third planet," Pol said, his voice tight. "The signal is old, maybe 100 years old, based on how weak and stretched out it is. But Commander, something is transmitting stronger signals now too. Much stronger, and much more recent." Sela felt a small chill run through her. In all her years of service, she had scanned dozens of systems. Most were dead. A few had primitive life, tribal societies not worth the Empire's attention. But structured radio signals, old and new, meant something else. It meant a civilization was growing. "Bring us closer," she said, quietly. "I want full sensor sweeps of that third planet." The ship moved in, engines humming low so as not to draw attention, though nobody on a planet that primitive should have been able to detect a cloaked Imperial scout ship anyway. As they got closer, the readings started coming in, and they did not make sense. "Commander," Pol said, his voice shaking now, "I'm reading satellites. Dozens of them. Some old and dead, some new and active. There are power signatures across the whole planet. Cities. Big cities. Lights. At night. Covering entire continents." "That's not possible," Sela said. "You said this planet showed no advanced life a week ago." "It didn't. I checked the old data myself. A week ago there was nothing. Now there's a whole civilization down there." This was the first strange thing, but it was not the last. "Commander, I'm reading ships in orbit," said the pilot, a small find named Durnall. "Metal ships. Not warships, not Imperial design, but they're in orbit around the planet. Some of them look like they're going farther out, leaving the system." Sela stood up and walked to the main screen. She stared at the blue and green planet on the display, small orbital objects blinking around it like fireflies. "Get me a deep scan," she said. "I want to know what species lives there, how advanced their weapons are, and how many warships they have, now." The scan took several minutes. The bridge crew waited in silence, the kind of silence that comes when everyone feels something is wrong, but nobody wants to say it out loud. Finally, the results came in, and Pol read them aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "Species, unknown. Calls itself human. Population, over 8 billion individuals. Weapons technology, primitive by Imperial standards, but Commander, they have nuclear weapons, thousands of them, enough to destroy their own planet many times over." "That's still low-level tech," Sela said, though she did not feel as calm as she sounded. "Most young species build weapons that can only hurt themselves." "It's sad, but it's normal. It's not a threat to us." "There's more," Pol said. "Their message signals. Commander, they've been broadcasting into space for over 100 years. Radio, then television, then digital signals, and they never stopped." They've been sending information about themselves into the void the entire time, with no idea if anyone was listening. Reckless, Sela muttered. A young species broadcasting their location and their secrets for anyone to find. No wonder they're still primitive. They don't even understand basic safety. She was about to tell Pol to keep gathering data quietly, to prepare a full report for Imperial Command without engaging the planet directly, standard procedure for any first contact situation. But before she could speak, the ship shuddered. "What was that?" she snapped. "Commander," Durnall said, his voice rising in pitch. "Something just touched our hull scanner. I don't know how. We're cloaked. We're using top-tier Imperial stealth technology. Nothing on that planet should be able to see us, let alone touch our systems." "Show me," Sela said. The screen flickered, and then showed a small object moving toward their ship. It was not one of the massive orbital satellites. It was small, sleek, moving with purpose. As it got closer, more details came through. "That's not a probe," Pol said slowly. "That's a drone, a small, fast drone, and Commander, it's looking right at us. It adjusted its course the moment we entered this system. It's been tracking us since we arrived." Sela's stomach turned cold. "That is impossible. We are fully cloaked. Nothing below Tier 3 Imperial technology can detect our stealth field." "I know," Pol said, "but it found us anyway." For a long moment, nobody on the bridge spoke. They simply stared at the small drone on their screen, drifting closer, closer, its sensors clearly locked onto their hidden ship. Then, without warning, a new voice came through their communications system. It was not the crackly old broadcast from before. This was clear, direct, and it was speaking in Imperial Standard, the common trade language used across 100,000 worlds. "Unknown vessel," the voice said, calm and level. "You are inside Earth's monitored space. Please state your designation and purpose, or you will be considered a threat." Sela felt her hands go cold on the console. A species that, by every reading the Empire had, should have been decades away from basic spaceflight. A species that had only just started sending satellites into orbit according to their own broadcast history, was speaking fluent Imperial Standard, tracking a cloaked Imperial scout ship, and demanding answers. "How?" she whispered. "Do they even know our language?" Nobody answered her. Nobody could. "Cut the cloak," she finally said. "There's no point hiding anymore. They already see us." The cloaking field dropped, and the Vareth's eye became visible in the void of space, its silver hull catching the light of the distant sun. The small human drone stayed exactly where it was, unmoving, watching. "Send a report to Imperial Command," Sela ordered. "Priority level red. Tell them we have found a species that should not be able to do what it just did." Pol's hands trembled as he typed the message. Far away, in the deep black of space, the message would travel for weeks before it reached the nearest relay station, and from there, jump across the galaxy toward the heart of the Empire. But the crew of the Vareth's Eye did not know that their small discovery was about to become the most important report the Empire had received in 1,000 years. Because far below them, in a control room on Earth, a young engineer named Marcus Chen leaned back in his chair, looked at the alien ship that had just uncloaked on his screen, and smiled. "Well," he said to his team, "guess we're not alone after all." He picked up a secure line and made a call that would soon be heard by the highest officials on the planet. Governments that had spent decades quietly preparing for exactly this moment, watching the stars, building defenses nobody outside a small circle knew existed, would now have to decide what to do next. Somewhere across the galaxy, an Imperial relay station received the priority red message from the Vareth's Eye. The officer on duty read it twice, not quite believing it, before forwarding it up the chain of command with a note that said, "This needs to reach the Emperor's Council immediately." The wheels of the largest empire in the galaxy had just started turning, and they were turning toward one small blue planet that nobody in the stars had ever heard of before. Nobody yet understood how much trouble that one report was about to cause. And far behind the drone, hidden from even the human sensors, more silent watchers observed the Imperial ship with quiet, careful interest. They had been waiting a long time for a moment like this. The message from the Vareth's Eye. traveled through the relay network for nearly a month before it reached the imperial capital, a massive ring-shaped station built around a dying star. This was the heart of the Empire, where the High Council ruled over thousands of star systems and thousands of species who called the Empire home, whether they wanted to or not. Grand Admiral Overick Kaas was not a man who liked surprises. He had served the Empire for over 200 years, thanks to advanced life extension treatments only the highest ranks could afford. He had crushed rebellions, conquered new worlds, and seen every trick a young species could try. He believed, deeply, that nothing in the galaxy could truly surprise him anymore. He was wrong. He read the report from Commander Threx 3 times before he called his aide into the room. "Is this verified?" he asked. "Not a joke? Not a glitch in the relay system?" "It's verified, sir," the aide said. "Commander Threx's ship arrived at the nearest fleet base 2 days ago for full debriefing. The sensor logs are authentic. Our own technicians confirmed the drone that tracked their cloaked ship was, in fact, built by the species in question. Basic materials. Nothing exotic, but the tracking method used something our scientists don't fully understand yet." Overick leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed. A species with primitive weapons and basic materials managed to track a cloaked Imperial vessel and speak to it in fluent Imperial standard. "Explain that to me." "We don't know how yet, sir, but there's something else you should see." The aide pulled up a second file. This one contained data gathered by a second scout ship, sent quietly after the first report to gather more information without making contact. What it found only made things stranger. The humans, as they called themselves, had been broadcasting all kinds of information into space for over a century. Radio shows, television programs, music, and eventually digital data. Most of it was harmless entertainment. But buried within it, spread across 100 years of broadcasts, were patterns, numbers, sequences that repeated in specific ways. "Our code analysts believe," the aide continued, "that the humans have been sending encoded messages hidden inside normal broadcasts for decades. Messages meant for something, or someone, to find." "Sending messages to who?" Overick asked. "They had no contact with any other species before we found them." "That's the strange part, sir. We don't think they were trying to contact us. We think they knew someone was already out there, something, and they were preparing." Overick stood up and walked to the window of his office, looking out at the ring-shaped station and the stars beyond it. In 200 years of service, he had learned that fear in the Empire usually came from 2 things: an enemy stronger than expected, or an enemy that could not be understood. This new species seemed to offer both. "Bring me everything we have," he said. "Every scrap of data from both scout ships. I want a full council meeting within the week." The council chamber was a massive circular room at the very center of the capital station. 12 seats, one for each of the ruling species that had earned a place on the High Council through centuries of service or conquest. When Overick entered, all 12 seats were filled, and the mood in the room was tense. The Councillor Yareth, an elder of the reptilian Skarn species, and the current head of the council. "You requested this emergency session. Explain yourself." Overick stepped to the center platform and activated the display. The image of Earth appeared, spinning slowly, surrounded by data points showing population numbers, technology levels, and the strange tracking event that had started everything. "Honored Council," he began. 3 months ago, one of our scout ships discovered a previously unknown species on a planet at the edge of Sector 9. This species calls itself human. By every normal measure, they are a young civilization. Basic nuclear weapons. Chemical rocket technology. No known contact with any other species before our arrival. "Then why," asked Councillor Vex, a small insectoid being with sharp mandibles, "are we having an emergency session over a primitive species? We discover new primitive worlds every year." "Because," Overick said, "this primitive species tracked and identified our cloaked scout ship using technology we cannot explain, and spoke to our crew in fluent Imperial standard, a language they should have had no way of learning." The room went quiet. "Show the recording," Overick said. The audio from the Verithai played through the chamber, the calm human voice, speaking perfect Imperial standard, asking the ship to identify itself or be considered a threat. When it finished, several council members exchanged uneasy glances. "There is more," Overick continued. "This species has been broadcasting hidden, encoded messages into deep space for over a century, long before we ever found them. Our analysts believe these messages may have been intended as a form of preparation, a message left for anyone who might eventually find them. We do not know what the messages say. We do not know who they were meant for." "Perhaps," Counselor Yareth said slowly, "they were meant for us." "Or for someone else," Overick said, "someone we have not yet identified." A murmur spread across the chamber. In all the history of the Empire, first contact with a new species followed a very predictable pattern. Powerful societies were found and either fought or negotiated with as equals. Weak societies were found and absorbed into the Empire, sometimes gently, sometimes not. But no species had ever been found that was both technologically weak and somehow able to detect, track, and communicate with an advanced cloaked warship using its own high-level language. It broke every pattern the Empire understood. "What do you recommend, Grand Admiral?" asked Counselor Vex. Overick had thought carefully about his answer before the meeting. He knew that showing too much fear in front of the council could hurt his standing, but he also knew that ignoring a real threat could be far worse. "I recommend caution," he said. "Send no large fleet yet. Instead, deploy a full sensor and intelligence-gathering task force to the system. Learn everything we can about their true capabilities before deciding on contact or conflict. And," he paused, "I recommend we begin quietly moving a strike fleet to a nearby staging point, in case caution is not enough." "You want to lock weapons on a primitive world before we even understand what we are dealing with?" Counselor Yareth asked, one eyebrow raised. "I want to be ready," Overick said, "in case what we are dealing with is not primitive at all." The council debated for hours. Some argued that reacting with military force to a technologically weak species would make the Empire look foolish, even cowardly, dealing harshly with something so small. Others argued that ignoring a clear and unexplained anomaly was exactly how empires fell, one small mistake at a time, one underestimated enemy after another. In the end, the vote was close, but it passed. A full intelligence task force, backed by a strike fleet of 20 warships, would be sent to the human system. Their orders were simple: observe, gather data, and if the humans showed any sign of true hidden strength, be ready to act immediately. Far away, in a quiet, secure room deep beneath the surface of Earth, a woman named Director Elena Vasquez looked over a report that had just been decoded from a very old, very careful message left in a distant relay buoy years earlier by a probe humanity had launched decades ago without publicly admitting it. The message confirmed what a small circle within Earth's governments had feared and prepared for since the very beginning of the space age. They were not the only intelligent species in the galaxy, and now, one of the more powerful ones had noticed them. "They're moving a fleet toward us," she said quietly to the officer beside her. "How many ships?" 20. Warships. She set the report down. "It's starting. Are we ready?" Elena looked at a second folder on her desk, one marked with the highest possible clearance level, containing decades of quiet research, technology recovered from a source she was not yet permitted to fully explain, even to her own president, and a program that very few people on Earth even knew existed. "We've been ready for longer than they know," she said. "Let's make sure they understand that clearly, before anyone does something we'll all regret." She picked up her phone and made the call that would activate the next phase of a plan that had been building quietly for generations, long before any alien scout ship ever entered their solar system. Far above the planet, more of Earth's silent watchers turned their sensors toward the deep black of space, tracking the exact point where an Imperial strike fleet would soon appear. They were ready. They had been ready for a very long time. And somewhere among the stars, the Empire's warships began their slow, careful journey toward a planet that, according to every record they had, should not have been able to see them coming at all. They were about to learn just how wrong that assumption truly was. The Imperial strike fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human solar system, 20 warships arranged in a wide defensive formation. Their commander, a stern woman named Fleet Captain Doria Wren, stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Iron Verdict, watching the small blue dot on her screen that was supposedly home to a species primitive enough to still use chemical rockets. "Status report," she said. "All ships arrived safely, Captain," said her tactical officer. "No sign of any reaction from the target planet yet." "Good. Begin passive scans. I want a full picture of their defenses before we get any closer." The fleet moved forward slowly, cautiously, using every sensor at their disposal. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. They picked up the same signals the earlier scout report had described: old radio broadcasts, satellites, orbital debris, a handful of small space stations, nothing that looked like a real military threat. Then, without warning, every sensor screen on every ship in the fleet lit up at once. "Captain," the tactical officer said, his voice sharp with alarm, "I'm reading contacts. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. They just appeared, all around us." Doria stood up immediately. "Appeared from where? Cloaked ships don't just appear out of nowhere unless they're field drops." "That's the thing, Captain. Our sensors show no indication these contacts were ever cloaked in the first place. It's like they weren't there. And now they are, all at once." On the main screen, small red markers filled the space around the Imperial fleet. Not 20 ships, not 50. Hundreds of small, sleek vessels, arranged in a loose formation that stretched far beyond what any primitive species should have been capable of building or operating. "Analysis," Doria demanded. "Working on it, Captain. But their design doesn't match anything in our database. The material signatures are strange, some kind of alloy we don't recognize. And Captain, their weapon systems, I'm reading power levels that shouldn't be possible for a species at their technology level." Doria felt her pulse quicken, though she kept her voice steady, the way any good commander should in front of her crew. "How is this possible? Our own intelligence reports described chemical rockets and basic satellites less than 4 months ago." "I don't know, Captain, but whatever they are now, they are not what our reports described." A new voice came through the ship's communication system, the same calm, level tone that had spoken to the first scout ship months earlier. "Imperial Fleet," the voice said, "you have entered a secured system without prior authorization. Please power down your weapon systems and identify your intentions, or you will be met with equal force." Doria's jaw tightened. She had faced pirate fleets, rebel militias, and hostile alien forces in her long career. She had never once been spoken to with such calm confidence, by a species her own intelligence reports called primitive. "This is Fleet Captain Doria Wren of the Imperial Navy," she said, opening a channel. "We come in peace, on a mission to observe and establish contact with your species. We mean you no harm." There was a pause before the voice answered. "Then you will understand why we ask you to power down your weapons first. Trust, Captain, works both ways." Doria looked at her tactical display, at the hundreds of human ships surrounding her 20 warships, and made a quick calculation. If this was a bluff, if these ships were empty shells with no real weapons behind them, then powering down would make her fleet look weak in front of a species that needed to learn its place in the galactic order. But if it was not a bluff, "Scan their weapon signatures again," she said quietly to her tactical officer. "Tell me the truth. Can we win this fight if it comes to that?" The officer worked quickly, running every calculation his systems could manage. When he looked up, his face had gone pale. "Captain, based on the power readings we're getting, if even half of those ships are carrying weapons at the strength our sensors suggest, we would lose this fight. Badly." Doria closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, her decision made. "Power down primary weapon systems," she ordered. "Open a full communication channel. We are not here to start a war we don't understand." On the other end of that channel, in a command center built deep within a mountain on Earth, Director Elena Vasquez watched the standoff unfold on a massive screen, surrounded by military officers and scientists who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. "They're powering down," said a young officer, relief clear in his voice. "Don't relax yet," Elena said. "This is only the first move. Keep our own weapons ready, but do not fire unless they do first. We want to show strength, not start a war we don't need." Beside her stood a man in a simple gray uniform, older than most in the room, with sharp eyes that had clearly seen many years of difficult decisions. His name was General Aaron Reyes, and he was one of the very few people on Earth who fully understood how humanity had managed to build a fleet of hundreds of advanced warships in near total secrecy. "They think we're primitive," he said quietly, almost to himself. "That worked in our favor for a long time, but it won't work forever. Once this empire realizes what we actually have, they'll either want to destroy us before we grow stronger, or they'll want to use us." "Which do you think it will be?" Elena asked. "Honestly, both, probably. From different people within their own government. Empires that large rarely agree on anything. We need to make sure whichever side they pick, they respect us enough to negotiate instead of attack." On the screen, the Imperial Fleet Captain's face finally appeared, translated instantly by systems humanity had quietly developed using older, mysterious technology, found decades ago in a location still not publicly known. Doria Wren looked tired, cautious, and clearly unsettled. "This is Fleet Captain Doria Wren of the Imperial Navy," she said. "We wish to open formal communication with a representative of your species." Elena stepped forward, taking her place in front of the camera. "This is Director Elena Vasquez, speaking on behalf of the government of Earth. We are prepared to talk, Captain, but we ask that any future approach to our system be done with proper notice. Sending 20 warships toward a planet you know very little about is not a friendly gesture." Doria's expression flickered with something like surprise, quickly hidden behind a professional mask. "Understood, Director. Our intention was caution, not aggression. Your species presented unusual readings that concerned our leadership." "We understand caution," Elena said. "We have plenty of our own, but we would prefer this relationship start with honesty instead of fear." There was a long pause before Doria answered. "I will relay your words to my superiors, Director. For now, my fleet will hold position and stand down from combat readiness as a show of good faith." "Thank you, Captain," Elena said. "We'll do the same." The channel closed, and for a moment, the command center was silent, the tension in the room slowly easing, though not disappearing entirely. "That went better than expected," said the young officer who had first reported the fleet's arrival. "It went exactly as we planned," General Reyes said. "But this is only the beginning. That fleet captain will report everything she saw here to people far more powerful than her, people who will not be so easy to calm down with a simple conversation." Elena nodded, looking at the screen, where the small red markers of the Imperial fleet remained frozen in place, surrounded on all sides by the far greater number of human ships that had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, the moment the Empire arrived. "Let them report it," she said. "Let the whole Empire know exactly what kind of neighbor they've found. Maybe next time they'll think twice before locking weapons on a planet they don't understand." Far above Earth, the standoff held, both fleets watching each other in careful silence, each side now aware that the other was far more dangerous than they had first believed. But this was only the calm before a much bigger storm, one that would soon reach all the way to the heart of the Empire itself. Fleet Captain Doria Wren's report reached the Imperial capital in record time, sent through priority channels reserved only for the most urgent military matters. Grand Admiral Overick Cass read it standing up, his hands gripping the edge of his desk so tightly his knuckles turned pale. 20 warships, sent to observe a primitive species, had been surrounded within hours by hundreds of unknown vessels, carrying weapon signatures, strong enough to defeat the entire strike fleet with ease. And the species behind it all had spoken calmly, confidently, asking the Empire to power down first, as if the Empire were the weaker side in the conversation. No one had spoken to an Imperial fleet that way in centuries. Overick called an emergency session with the High Council within the hour. But this time, the mood in the chamber was different. It was not simple curiosity or careful concern anymore. It was something closer to real fear, the kind that spreads quickly among people who have never truly felt threatened before. "Explain to me," Counselor Yareth said, his reptilian eyes narrow and sharp, "how a species with what our records describe as chemical rocket technology built hundreds of advanced warships without a single scout ship or listening post detecting it." "We don't fully know, Counselor," Overick admitted, "but our analysts have a theory." "Let's hear it," said Counselor Vex. Overick activated the display, showing the strange, hidden messages found buried in the human broadcasts over the past century. We believe these encoded signals were never meant to reach us. We believe humanity has known about other intelligent life for far longer than we assumed, and that these messages were part of a long-term plan, one designed to prepare for a moment exactly like this one. Prepare for what exactly? Yareth asked. First contact, or war? Possibly both, Overick said. We believe humanity built its true strength in secret, keeping their public technology deliberately primitive to avoid drawing attention, while quietly developing far greater capabilities behind the scenes. When our scout ship stumbled onto them, that secret was no longer fully safe, and they revealed just enough of their strength to make sure we understood not to test them further. The council chamber fell into a heavy, uneasy silence. In all the history of imperial expansion, no species had ever managed to hide its true strength this successfully, right up until the moment they chose to reveal it. What of the strike fleet? Counselor Vex asked. Is Fleet Captain Wren still in position? Yes, Overick said. Both sides have stood down from active combat readiness. For now, we are at a peaceful standstill. Then I move, said Counselor Yareth slowly, that we escalate immediately, send the 3rd Battle Fleet, our strongest force, to that system. Overwhelming numbers will remind this species of the true difference in power between us. That could start a war we are not prepared to win, Overick said carefully. If a small strike fleet found itself matched hundreds to 20, sending our 3rd Battle Fleet may only provoke a response we cannot predict. Then what do you suggest, Grand Admiral? Yareth snapped. That we simply allow an unknown species to humiliate an Imperial fleet and do nothing in response. Overick took a slow breath, choosing his next words carefully. He had spent 200 years learning that the loudest voice in a room was rarely the wisest one, especially when facing something truly new. I suggest negotiation, backed by strength, not aggression that could lead us into a war, with an enemy whose true limits we do not yet know. The debate that followed lasted for hours, splitting the council roughly into 2 camps. One side, led by Counselor Yareth, believed any sign of weakness now would only invite future challenges from other ambitious species, watching how the Empire handled this crisis. The other side, led quietly by Overick himself, believed that attacking an enemy of unknown strength, an enemy that had already proven capable of matching an Imperial fleet with ease, was the kind of mistake that had ended empires before. In the end, a compromise was reached, though an uneasy one. The 3rd Battle Fleet would be sent, not to attack, but to stand ready near the human system as a clear show of Imperial strength, while a formal diplomatic mission would be sent ahead of them to attempt real negotiation. But not everyone on the council agreed to wait patiently for diplomacy to work. 3 days later, deep within a private section of the Imperial capital, Counselor Yareth met quietly with a small group of like-minded officers and nobles who believed the council's cautious approach was a dangerous mistake. The council grows weak, Yareth said to the group gathered in his private chambers. They fear a species we have not even properly tested. If we wait for diplomacy while this human civilization grows stronger, we may find ourselves facing an enemy far too powerful to stop. What do you propose? Asked one of the officers, a hard-faced man named General Traxus, commander of a smaller fleet stationed not far from the human system. A demonstration, Yareth said. Nothing that would start a full war, but enough to make our true strength clear. A single strike on an isolated outpost, something small enough to claim was an accident if questioned, but strong enough to remind this species exactly who truly rules the stars. General Traxus considered this for a long moment. He had heard the reports from Fleet Captain Wren's mission, and part of him was cautious as well. But he had also spent his entire life believing in the absolute strength of the Empire, and the idea of bowing carefully to a species that, until recently, had been using chemical rockets, offended something deep within him. I have 3 warships close enough to reach the edge of their system within days, he said slowly. A strike on one of their smaller, isolated outposts, far from their main defenses, could be done quickly and quietly. Do it, Yareth said, before the Council's diplomatic mission has a chance to make us look weak. 2 days later, a small human research outpost, a modest station built on an asteroid at the edge of the solar system, monitoring deep space for exactly this kind of threat, picked up the signature of 3 Imperial warships approaching at high speed, weapons already charging. The station's small crew, only 12 people, immediately sent out an emergency alert before beginning evacuation procedures, though everyone on board knew there likely wasn't enough time to fully escape before the attack began. Back in the deep command center beneath Earth, alarms began blaring across every screen. "Director Vasquez," an officer called out, "we have an Imperial strike incoming on Outpost 7. Estimated impact in 11 minutes. Elena felt her stomach drop. That's a research station. 12 people, no weapons beyond basic point defense. Get every nearby defense ship moving now." "Already moving, Director, but the nearest response fleet is 14 minutes out. We won't make it in time." General Reyes, standing beside her, clenched his jaw. "Then we use the other option." Elena hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Do it. Authorization, Vasquez 7 Alpha." Deep beneath the ocean, in a location known to fewer than 100 people on the entire planet, massive doors began to open, revealing something far beyond anything Earth's public space program had ever shown the world, or the Empire. A single vessel, sleek, dark, and unlike anything in either species' known records, launched into the sky at a speed that defied every physical law the Imperial warships understood. By the time General Traxxas's 3 warships arrived at Outpost 7, weapons ready to fire, the strange dark vessel was already there, positioned directly between the attacking ships and the small human station. "Unidentified vessel," came the Imperial channel, tense and confused. "Power down and move aside, or you will be fired upon." There was no response. Instead, a wave of energy, calm and precise, swept across all 3 Imperial warships at once, disabling their weapon systems entirely, without destroying the ships or harming their crews. On the bridge of his flagship, General Traxxas stared at his suddenly useless weapon controls in stunned disbelief. That's not possible," he whispered. "No known weapon can disable a ship that completely without firing a single shot." A calm human voice came through his communication system, the same steady tone that had spoken to Fleet Captain Wren days earlier. "You were warned," the voice said simply. "This outpost, and every person aboard it, is under our protection. Return to your fleet, General Traxxas, and relay a message to your council. Humanity does not wish for war, but we will not stand by quietly while our people are threatened." The 3 Imperial warships, weapons completely disabled, had no choice but to retreat, limping back toward Imperial space, their crews shaken by what they had just witnessed. Back in the Imperial capital, when the report of the failed strike reached the High Council, Councillor Yareth's secret plan quickly unraveled, and the council chamber erupted into chaos, fear now mixing openly with anger and confusion. Because the truth was now undeniable to everyone in the room. Whatever humanity truly was, whatever quiet, secretive strength they had spent generations building, it was far beyond anything the Empire had faced in its long, proud history. And somewhere far above Earth, Director Elena Vasquez watched the retreating Imperial warships on her screen, knowing that this small, tense victory had bought humanity time, but not peace, not yet. "They'll come back," General Reyes said quietly beside her. "Bigger and angrier next time." "Then we'll be ready," Elena said. "Just like we always have been." News of the failed strike on Outpost 7 spread through the Imperial capital like wildfire, and by the time it reached the full High Council, Councillor Yareth found himself standing before his fellow councillors, not as a bold leader who had shown proper strength, but as a reckless fool who had nearly started a war the Empire could not win. "You acted without council approval," Councillor Vex said coldly, "and your reckless strike was stopped by a single unidentified vessel, 1 ship, against 3 of our warships, disabled completely without a single shot fired in return. Do you understand what that means, Yareth?" Yareth said nothing, his earlier confidence gone, replaced by a tight, controlled anger, directed mostly at himself. Grand Admiral Ovrek Cass stood at the center of the chamber, his expression grim but calm. "It means," he said, "that everything we assumed about this species was wrong. Not simply their weapons, not simply their numbers, but their entire approach to war itself. They did not destroy General Traxxas's ships when they easily could have. They disabled them, sent a warning, and let them return home. A message of restraint, Counselor Vex said slowly, or a message of confidence. A species secure enough in its own strength that it doesn't need to destroy every enemy that challenges it. Either way, Ovrek said, it tells us clearly that provoking them further would be a grave mistake. The Council voted swiftly this time, stripping Yareth of his authority to command any Imperial forces and formally condemning the attack on Outpost 7 as an act taken without proper sanction. It was a small gesture, but an important one, meant to be relayed directly to humanity as proof that the unauthorized strike did not represent the will of the Empire as a whole. The diplomatic mission that had already been prepared was sent immediately, no longer trailing behind a battle fleet meant to intimidate, but traveling alone, carrying a formal apology and a request for real, careful negotiation. Weeks later, a single Imperial diplomatic vessel entered Earth's solar system, escorted respectfully by a handful of human ships that met it at the edge of the system rather than allowing it to approach unguided. Aboard the vessel was an elderly Imperial diplomat named Ambassador Corandellis, a calm and thoughtful man who had spent his long career negotiating with dozens of species across the galaxy, though none quite like this one. He was brought to a large conference hall in Geneva, built specifically for this historic meeting, where Director Elena Vasquez and General Reyes waited to greet him, along with representatives from every major nation on Earth, standing together for the first time in true, unified purpose. Ambassador Dellis, Elena said, extending a hand in the human custom, which the ambassador had clearly been briefed on and returned properly. Welcome to Earth. Director Vasquez, Dellis replied, his translated voice calm and respectful. On behalf of the Imperial High Council, I offer our sincere apologies for the unauthorized attack on your outpost. Those responsible have been removed from command. It was never the will of our leadership to threaten your people. We appreciate that, Ambassador, Elena said. But I think it's important we speak plainly here. Humanity did not build what we have in secret because we wanted war. We built it because history taught us, over and over, on our own small planet, that peace without the ability to defend it rarely lasts long. Dellis nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in her words more than most in his own empire might have expected from a species so young. A lesson many civilizations learn the hard way, Director. I hope, moving forward, our two peoples can build something better than fear and suspicion. Over the following weeks, careful negotiations began, slow and cautious at first, but steady. Humanity made clear that it had no interest in joining the Empire as a subject people, nor did it wish to become an enemy locked in endless conflict. Instead, they proposed something the Empire had rarely encountered before, a relationship built on mutual respect between equals, trade and knowledge shared carefully, but sovereignty and independence firmly protected on both sides. It was not an easy negotiation. Some within the Empire still argued that humanity's hidden strength made them too dangerous to leave independent, while a small number of voices within Earth's own governments worried that any deal with the Empire was simply delaying an eventual conflict. But slowly, patiently, a framework began to take shape, one built not on domination, but on careful, respectful boundaries. Months later, aboard the Imperial Capital Station, Grand Admiral Ovrek Cass stood once again before the High Council, delivering his final report on the matter that had shaken the Empire's confidence more than any threat in centuries. The treaty with Earth has been signed, he announced. Humanity remains fully independent, governed entirely by its own laws, while agreeing to peaceful trade and limited exchange of certain non-military technologies with the Empire. In return, the Empire agrees to formally recognize their territory as protected, off-limits to further military action without cause. And their true strength? Counselor Vex asked. Do we finally understand the full extent of what they hid from us? Ovrek allowed himself a small, tired smile. No, Counselor, we do not, and I suspect we may never fully know. But perhaps that uncertainty is exactly the lesson this entire experience was meant to teach us. What lesson is that? Yareth asked quietly from his seat, his voice far more humble now than it had been months earlier. That an empire as old and as large as ours can still be wrong, Ovrek said. That strength is not always loud, and true power is not always about who has the biggest fleet, but about who is wise enough to know when restraint serves them better than aggression. Humanity taught us that lesson, without firing a single unnecessary shot. The council chamber fell into a thoughtful silence, one very different from the fear and confusion that had filled it months before. Back on Earth, Elena Vasquez stood on a balcony overlooking the night sky, the stars stretching endlessly above her, no longer feeling quite so distant or unknown. General Reyes stood beside her, his usual serious expression softened slightly with quiet relief. "We did it," he said. "Peace, without losing who we are." "For now," Elena said. "But this is only the beginning, Aaron. The galaxy is bigger than one empire, and now that they know we're here, others will find out soon enough too." "Are we ready for that?" Reyes asked. Elena looked up at the stars, thinking of the generations of quiet, careful preparation that had brought humanity to this exact moment. The sacrifices, the secrets, and the long, patient work of building something strong enough to protect their small blue planet, without losing its soul in the process. "We've been getting ready for a very long time," she said finally, "and whatever comes next, we'll face it the same way we always have, together." Above them, the stars continued their slow, silent turn, carrying countless untold stories across the vast darkness of space. Somewhere among them, humanity's small, careful place in the wider galaxy had just begun, no longer hidden, no longer alone, but standing, finally, as equals among the stars. And far beyond the edges of known space, other eyes, patient and curious, continued watching the small blue planet that had just done the impossible, wondering quietly what humanity might do next. The end.